The waves don't scare me today, but the rain is really annoying. But today there are the right conditions to catch big breams. And to do this, I am using a special bait, the red shrimp. This weekend, the conditions have been prohibitive throughout Sardinia, and to find a suitable spot, I had to drive for a couple of hours. In the end, I stopped here, in Jeremias, in a spot that is slightly more sheltered than the others, but where the sea is still very rough, and on the beach, hundreds of small jellyfish are seen washed ashore by the storm. The beach is full of these small jellyfish that, of course, the breams and other fish go to eat when they find them, especially after the rough sea. And this is a great sign. These are the by-the-wind sailors, also known as St. Peter's boats, because they have a sort of sail on the top. They live on the surface in numerous colonies that are often washed ashore by the waves. I am looking for a place to fish. I like it here, but it is very dangerous, especially I wouldn't be able to record the video. This little cove here. I think I will position myself over here, where there is a decent current. Let's try to prepare the ground bait. This would really be the ideal spot today. However, it is quite steep, and recording by myself would be impossible. I decide to move a few meters back into shallower water to a much more pleasant spot. I decided to stop here because there is a nice strip that leads out to sea, so it may be that I have managed to catch the right current for fishing. But above all, because it is a simple place to take the shots all by myself. Now, before fishing, the most important thing is to prepare the ground bait. I brought several things for the ground bait. I will make a ground bait based on sliced bread, a trabuco bait that is excellent for white breams and maggots. This mixture that I will create will be exceptional for the white bream and for the sargo. So before I start fishing, I will begin to prepare the ground bait for about 20 minutes, half an hour, and only then will I take out the fishing rod. Now let's start making the ground bait and see how the current moves, if it carries it well offshore. I would need a slingshot for ground bait, which unfortunately I don't have, but I can easily bait with this slingshot using small ball. The ground bait is essential. Even in this dark and turbulent water, the fish feel the strong call of the bait and approach, hungry, starting to eat both the maggots and the small pieces of sliced bread. After half an hour, we need to pull our line right at that spot, and the fish should immediately bite the bait. For bait, I brought maggots, of course, red shrimp, which cost a lot of money, and some cuttlefish that I prepared and sliced into strips at home this morning, because doing it at the fishing spot is really quite inconvenient. Now I will continue to prepare the ground bait. Then we can calmly set up the rod. 20 minutes have passed, and I bait the first rod with a small piece of cuttlefish and cast it out. However, the current is very strong and moves the float very quickly. I didn't expect to find this sea, and indeed the rig is not suitable for this strong current. I should use a heavier float because the one I am using was mainly intended for fishing for white bream. Yet, right from the very first minutes, something begins to be seen and the float goes down forcefully. He hooked a big fish and it seems to be a sargo. In fact, it tries to dive to the bottom, and I can tell by the strong head shakes I feel on the fishing rod. The biggest difficulty now is precisely to avoid the line rubbing against the rocks and getting cut. Calmly, however, I managed to get the better of him, but thinking of using the net is madness. I am forced to lift him up by hand, and to do this, I take advantage of the weight. I don't know if you can see it because I have giant hands, but the bream is really beautiful right away, like I haven't even dropped it in this sea. Fantastic, it works. How wonderful. As you may have noticed, the bream has swallowed the hook, and unfortunately, I am forced to cut the line. But before redoing everything, I continue to ground bait, as this is essential. Among the very few things I brought, I choose a small box of hooks and a thicker line to avoid breaking everything among the rocks. Did you see how I pull them up by weight? Among the very few things I brought, I choose a packet of hooks and a thicker line to avoid breaking everything among the rocks.
There you go. You see why it's important to be quick at tying knots, because everything changes when fishing. However, the sea is getting even more agitated. And in this even more agitated sea, I fish for another 5 minutes, using cuttlefish as bait, but I don't have great results. But the fish should be feeding, and I want to try changing bait. It's time to use red shrimp, and to prepare them, I cut small pieces and remove the shell. Compared to cuttlefish, it is definitely a softer bait, but much more appealing. I try to cast it in the same spot, which is not easy with the waves and the wind in my face, but as soon as the float reaches the right spot, it goes down, and I hook a nice fish again. This one also seems to be a bream, but this time it is more aggressive than the first. He wants to go under the rock on the left at all costs, and with a bit of force, I force him to change direction, and as soon as I manage to tire him out a little, taking advantage of the wave, I pull him up by force. This is also a nice bream, and while handling it, I manage to get its spine stuck between my fingers. It's extremely painful. So I'm having fun, to tell you the truth, but I'm fishing poorly. Why? Because unfortunately I only brought an English float, and here instead a fixed float was needed. I expected to find the wind at my back. The problem is that the only fixed float I have is this one, and it is very small for these conditions, but I will try to change it later. The waves indeed drag the line and sink the float, making it impossible to tell if a fish is actually biting. But the sea, fortunately, removes all my doubts. The float goes down, but when I reel in, the hook, it is snagged on the bottom. It's a large rock, and I can't get the better of it. I am forced to break the line and lose everything. Float, hook, and weights. So I made the new rig. It took me very little time, and I think I will have even more fun. In fact, as you can see, there is a float already weighted. A couple of weights to sink the bait. And here you can see a very useful quick release swivel. Now I pull the float up about 1.5 meters, so I can fish well. Let's go! This float works definitely better, but the big problem is that it is too light. In fact, there is a strong current, and the bait remains too high off the bottom, preventing the fish from biting it. Unfortunately, this float is too light, so I can't add weights to it, and I'm working high. Which would be fine if there were some sea bass, but today is a bream day, so I'll come up with something. Now let's see what I have in my sewing bag, and see if I can create another English float. Which is not ideal, I repeat, but we will adapt. I didn't remember having caught it, but fortunately I had. I've got it. I've got the float. It's fine at 10 grams. This should work perfectly. Let's redo everything quickly. Quickly, in 5 seconds, I've made the new rig, which as you can see is very simple. There are 2 beads, with a small stopper threaded onto the line. Float, swivel, and hook. And as soon as I cast, the float starts to go down again. But these bites seem a bit more timid. In fact, something is on the line. But it's a smaller fish, and it's a bream that I managed to lift very easily. I always throw the little ones back, being careful not to pull them onto the rocks. But as in the best traditions, it starts to rain relentlessly, and I am now completely soaked. Furthermore, as soon as the front passes, the wind begins to shift by 180 degrees, making fishing almost impossible. Now it's raining too. Anyway, you could say this is a bit of a crappy life. Now it's raining too. Anyway, you could say this is a bit of a crappy life. Oh my. Then filming alone is a real hassle. Really. 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 Anyway, the float is too light, it keeps sinking and nothing is clear. It's not good. Sorry. I'm saving the cameras, the batteries and everything. Here we needed a float that was much bigger. I didn't bring it. My fault, my fault. But now let's continue fishing, okay? And between the wind and the rain, I continue to fish, but I can only pull up a small bream. Yet the big fish should be down there, but they are not feeding. It's really tough, alone. The fishing is poor. Now I've gotten snagged precisely because I should have. Adjusted the float. I didn't do it. I'm wasting a lot of time, but I won't give up. The wind is now so strong that it lifts the foam from the waves, creating a wonderful effect. But I keep trying. And finally, another big fish on the line. Oh, what a sea! And with the waves becoming even larger, I managed to pull up this last bream. But by now, fishing has become practically impossible because the float goes down every 5 seconds. And I can't tell if the fish have eaten or if it's just the waves. That's enough. I can't take it anymore. Then it started to rain. I got quite wet. And the conditions, I must say, changed. So, with the wind in his face, the sea calmed down a bit. And the fish stopped biting. Anyway, I managed to take advantage of the window. I'm happy because I had fun, and that's what matters. I didn't fish well. I should have had a heavier float, so I could cast a bit farther and see the bites. But oh well, patience. I had prepared for a different sea, for a different fish, because I was looking for the bogue. But we will find the white bream. But anyway, if you liked the video, I remind you to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. In the end, I had fun today. I caught some nice fish, even though I got really wet. But these are actually the best conditions for catching big fish, when they come close to the shore to look for food.